All right, welcome everybody to another Friday, BS Friday, and we got a special guest with us today, and we're going to have a lot of fun with our special guest today, and we're going to be talking about what is ROCKWOOL. How is it different than other insulating products in the marketplace? Why is insulation so important? Water, vapor, acoustics, fire suppression, and more. What are some of the benefits of vapor open wall systems? What are some of the benefits of exterior insulation versus cavity insulation? And how ROCKWOOL deals with moisture. And joining me today on this is going to be our good friend, Sean St. O'More. What's happening, Sean?
Hey, man. How are you? Sorry that I'm on the side of the road going to an offsite factory. You know how we all love offsite production. So I'm heading to one of the sites and I couldn't get there in time to show you, but that's okay. I'm glad to be here and connect with you and with everyone that's joining us today. So pleasure, everybody. Everyone, Sean St. O'More, 475 Outreach and Education Associate. So love educating builders on how to build better, and glad always to be here with you, Dave. So looking forward to the show.
Well, hey, listen, based on what 475 is all about and what you do in your outreach and all of your videos, I couldn't think of a better person to talk about exterior, interior, insulation. I mean, you have this stuff down pat. You deal with it every day. You educate the public on it every day, and people within our industry. So what has you excited about this conversation today?
Well, again, I mean, ROCKWOOL is developing. I mean, they've come to North America, brought a product, and just expanded tenfold in recent years. And what I like about it is we need more insulation on our buildings. This is a given. We talk about high performance and Pascal's principles. That sweater detail is critical, and they have products that deal with putting the sweater on the inside of the house, on the below the houses, above the houses, and a lot more on the outside of the houses. So we talk about insulation, outsolation, and today we're going to dive into the thick of things about how it works, what does it do, and how does it make the buildings better so that they're able to dry out and ensure that we get to a lot of resiliency and durability of our membranes. So, and our wall assemblies.
I love how you said that, insulation and outsolation. I don't think a lot of people actually think of it that way, but that's exactly what it is. All right, everybody, listen, we are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter, so get your tweets on. If you're not following us on YouTube, please go there and subscribe right now at davecooper.live. And if you are not following the Sean St. O'More, that's right, I practice his name because I want to get it right. I know he hates it when I do that. Sean St. O'More. You need to be following Sean St. O'More and 475 and also watching what they do, because Sean has his own vlog and his own podcast where he's educating the community as well. So I think this is going to be a lot of fun for us today, Sean. Why don't you give us a quick intro on this magnificent person who is joining us today from ROCKWOOL, because he's going to educate us, and we're going to get into the building science in just a few moments. But first, intro, Sean.
Perfect. All right. Well, this gentleman's, again, lucky to have in our industry. He's somebody that has been in the thick of things. He's been able to work with contractors, designers. And so we're really privileged to have someone so really understands how the stuff works, how it gets applied, and then is going to be able to dive into the details with us today. So let's bring on Mr. Nick Stone, who is the Northeast Building Development Manager. Nick, how you doing today?
Good, guys. How you doing?
Doing great.
Doing good, Nick. On. So, Nick, originally you're the Northeast, right? Building, development manager for ROCKWOOL. Today, though, however, you are sitting in beautiful Texas in a hotel room, having time on a call with us when you probably would rather be outside enjoying some of that Texas warm weather.
I tell you, it's been beautiful down here. It was 82 degrees. My wife back home, I told her that last night, and she said, "You're kidding me. It's 32 out." She was so bummed.
That's right. Well, you know what? But at least she can go skiing. I think they're getting a lot of snow up in Vermont, aren't they?
Yeah, we're getting some. It's come already.
Perfect. Well, listen, we only have an hour, Nick. So, like everybody else that comes on this show, we want to know everything about you from the moment you were born to this very moment in time. Do not leave out any of the good stuff from the hospital. Or Mark Willie's mom, Diane, will call your mother, and we will have her on the show. And I'm sure it'll get rather embarrassing for you if that happens. So you only have 2 minutes to do it. Go for it.
Perfect. So I went to VTC for college, got an associate's degree in construction management. From there, I went to I worked for an installation company for 3 years where I got BPI certified. Did a lot of blower door tests, installation in attics, basements. That's kind of where I first got my taste of air sealing and insulation, the mechanics behind it. From there, I went to work for a lumberyard where I focused heavily on designing wall assemblies from exterior WRBs, interior vapor throttles. And I really kind of found my home on this whole exterior insulation package business. And while I worked at RK Miles on the weekends, I actually worked, I owned an installation company too. So on the weekends, I'd go insulate and really try to hone in my skills and knowledge set on the technical side and the information side. That way, when I came to the builder, I had both sides and I could really kind of talk to them through and through instead of just talking about ideas and principles. I had that real background of the install. So my whole world kind of became about insulation, about air sealing, dew points. Kind of a quick funny story. When my first 2 kids were born, I actually would put them to sleep by reading them building science journals. My poor kids. But that's how I really started my whole thing, was doing that with them. I'm just kind of that weird guy.
That's such a great story. Again, my wife doesn't dig all the passive stuff. And she's like, yeah, Sean, it's time for bedtime. Can you just talk about passive houses? And I talk about the principles and the standards and all the benefits. And, 5 seconds later, she's asleep. I was like, come on. Why are you passionate about it than I am? So I hear you, man. Good stuff.
Awesome.
Well, listen, reading building science literature to your children is a brilliant way to put them to sleep. I never even thought of that. I used to just lay my kids by the faucet and turn on the water. Hopefully I didn't fall asleep and they fall in there. Hey, interestingly enough, we got Mr. Mark Willie
showed up.
Hey, Mark.
Are you on a train?
Yeah, guys, I only hear about every 4th word, so I'm going to try in a couple miles. Nick, great to have you on the show. Dave, happy day, Friday. Sean, you're awesome.
You're awesome too, buddy.
Hey. We'll keep you in the background and just bring you in and out every once in a while. How's that sound?
Perfect. Well, I guess, Dave, let's dive into some questions. We want to know more about what Nick can offer. So question number 1 for you, Nick, is what are some of the benefits of a vapor open wall system?
So this is actually one of my favorite areas to talk about. This idea of vapor open versus vapor closed, and kind of what the differences are. So vapor closed would be a wall system where, vapor doesn't pass through the assembly. But vapor open, this is where I think it's so unique, is, especially up in the Northeast where I come from, you have these dew point problems where you get these condensation in these wall assemblies. And the question becomes, how do you take that vapor out and, move it to the inside, move it to the outside, and keep that system dry and durable? Well, for me, that's, that goal was to design a vapor open wall assemblies. And that's what I did at the lumberyard I worked at. Was I focused on taking all the options on the market, bring them together and take a holistic approach and kind of design that. So what we did is we came up with these ideas of these vapor open wall assemblies where if we had moisture that had condensation happens in the wall cavity, how do we get that out of there? And that's using products like ROCKWOOL, where they are vapor open, so that vapor can go to the outside and to the inside, versus something where if you do a vapor closed exterior insulation package, it's not that it's bad, but you're relying 100% on inward drying potential if you get moisture within the cavity. So, I just had found in the Northeast that having this 2-directional drying potential is so big that it changes the game, in my opinion.
Well, maybe we should take a step back for a second, Dave. Let's just talk about, why we're looking at diffusion of drying over walls versus just how they work. So code built homes, or I kind of tell people cabins, because really there's not much difference in how we build a cabin and a code built right now, is we dry the homes, we turn up the heat in the wintertime, and we dry out the insides. The summertime, we let the walls bake from the outside. That's typically how walls dry in our current kind of homes that are, maybe don't have as much insulation. Once we start adding these layers of insulation, either adding more inter or outsolation, then the only way that these walls dry is through diffusion. And that's where, as Nick said, you really need these vapor open walls to allow for that drying to occur. And in our cold climates, where most of the year the drying is to the outside, it really matters that you have wall systems that can dry to the outside. And so if you put rock wool on the outside, then again, it's a vapor open, and you can have that outward drying, which is happening for most of the year.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, getting into this, Sean and Nick, I mean, technically speaking, I don't think the average person understands how much vapor is created on the interior of a home, or the vapor, transfers from the exterior to the interior and vice versa. And I think this is an important thing to talk about, especially with your product, and ROCKWOOL, and what the benefits of allowing this vapor to pass through, because there's the ROCKWOOL side of it, but then you have all the other layers of a house. And then you have the sheetrock or whatever the interior layers of a house are. And not all of those products are set up to be, vapor transfer or vapor barriers or, open wall systems. So having an idea of the products that you're using from the interior through to the exterior wall makes a huge difference. And ROCKWOOL's one piece of that solution. Is that the best way to say it?
It is, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
And Sean, with what you've been doing at 475, you have a lot of those other pieces of the solution as well. So as we're looking at this holistically with the ROCKWOOL system, what should people really be paying attention to in an existing house, or can this technology and what you guys are talking about only be done on new construction?
Yeah, I mean, the retrofit whole discussion, I mean, we're just touching on it. I mean, think about it. Every building built today needs to be retrofitted to high performance. There's going to be a lot of performance and a lot of discussion about retrofits coming up. Europe is already on track to do it, but the kind of goal right now is to meet some of the climate goals we need to be doing. We need to be retrofitting 3% of our housing stock per year at a minimum. And so this is where, again, when we're looking at taking off our cladding, or looking at, that kind of sexy outfit that our buildings have, and then putting more insulation on, this is where we're heading. And ROCKWOOL is a great solution for adding that sweater detail. And then if you include, your tapes and membranes to ensure fair tightness, you have this great combo for getting to a really great building.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned the word sweater, so everybody understands when Sean says sweater, he's talking about the exterior wall insulation, just like you'd wear a sweater. So, some industry terminology that actually just makes sense if you think about it.
Well, it's one of those things, when you're cold as a kid, and you're like, "Oh, Mom, I'm cold, turn up the heat." And she turned around and said, "No, put on a sweater." Well, we're doing the same thing with our buildings. And I kind of tease, we're putting slippers on the foundation, sweaters on the house, and a toque on the roof. You guys might call it a beanie. In Canada, we call it a toque. And so, that whole idea of outsolation is what we need to be doing. And ROCKWOOL has products to take care of all those warming attributes.
Yep, for sure. So Nick, that kind of leads us into our second question, and with, some of the attributes that your product has, you guys are doing interior insulation, you're doing outerior, as Sean would say, out insulation as well, or the sweater systems. What are some of the benefits of the exterior insulation versus that interior cavity insulation?
Sure. So, if we think about traditionally how we always been building houses, we put that bat inside the cavity. So when we do that, that dew point has to fall somewhere within that cavity. So I guess first of all, we're going to start off with moisture. That's kind of where I'm headed with this. But that dew point is going to fall somewhere within that cavity. So if we know that, that it always falls in there, well, then we have to kind of always think about, okay, what's my moisture doing? How is that going to affect it? How much is going to be in there and all those things? But, if we use kind of the exterior idea, then we put insulation on the outside. What we can do is we can take that dew point, we can warm that sheathing up by putting enough insulation on the outside. And now we can start manipulating that dew point. We can take that dew point that was within the wall cavity and now pull it to the outside of our WRB in our sheathing layer. And now we can let it condense outside of the building structure. And that's going to keep that system more durable long-term. It's going to keep, it's from a health standpoint, you're not going to have issues like mold and water being in the assembly. And so with that, you're going to really keep a much more durable assembly. And kind of the building science behind kind of how that works is dew point wise, every 18.2 degrees swing in temperature on average, you're going to swing kind of 50% relative humidity. So in Vermont, it's pretty average to see a 40% relative humidity within our wall assembly. So if we think about 70 degrees inside, 0 degrees outside, now we've swung that 3 to 4 times. And if you do that, that math, that goes above 100%. So whatever condensation that would have been in that wall cavity without exterior insulation would have had condensation inside the cavity. Well, now, because we have that exterior insulation, when that has that condensation point, well, it's outside of WRB, so it's less likely to cause issues. We're going to have a more durable assembly. You're going to have better air quality. These are all just extremely positive things. And that's what a huge benefit of doing an exterior insulation package versus an interior insulation package.
It doesn't mean you do away with the interior insulation package, right? You don't just have empty cavity walls. So I want to be really, really clear with that. And I know Sean, this is his favorite topic. I already know it, and I'm going to let him go on it. But one of the things with this, Nick, because you said, all right, healthier living, right? Less moisture in the wall means less bugs, less infiltration, animals that want to live in the walls. But let's talk about what controlling the humidity level, controlling the moisture does for the actual atmosphere, for the occupants inside. Like Sean, you said, we wear sweaters, we wear slippers, we wear hats. Humidity level plays a big part in the comfort in a home, depending on what that is. Sean, I'll let you kind of elaborate on that because I know you know this inside out.
Yeah, hopefully you don't have to pop out the soapbox button, but just to kind of break it down for people, that what Nick just said is, and the studies that I've seen is in cold climates, if you just did a minimum of even 1 inch of exterior insulation, you've reduced the bulk water or condensation happening on your plywood. And that's massive because now the water, like we deal with buildings, the number one thing we need to manage is bulk water. So if bulk water is away from our buildings, we've just increased the opportunity for durability and resiliency of our wall assemblies, and our walls don't have to work hard dealing with drying. So when we do that out insulation and the insulation, we now have an opportunity where we're keeping the occupants warm, keeping them in between 40 and 60% relative humidity, which is that sweet spot of what humans like. And the reason that we keep the insulation continuing as well as the out insulation is because we've got the cavities between our studs. We might as well fill them up with something. Interesting enough, though, we all went from 2x4s to 2x6, not for structure, for more insulation. So you actually could now change your wall assemblies. And Nick, maybe I'll get your comment on this too, is going back to a 2x4 wall and then moving that extra insulation outboard, because what we're trying to do, and this is where I wish Mark was here, is we're trying to stop the thermal bridge of heating and cooling getting lost in the buildings through the studs. And so there's an opportunity where you reduce the insulation, move it to outsulation using the ROCKWOOL components, and you got a more durable, resilient wall.
Let's Nick, when you jump into this, talking about that thermal break and everything, and that more durable wall, and going and obviously going to a 2x4 is so much more better than using a 2x6 for the environment for so many other reasons. I really want to understand, how do you attach that to the wall? How do you break those thermal breaks? All of that stuff, Nick. So when you talk about that, can you get into the science part?
Yeah, I guess starting off with a 2x4 wall versus 2x6, it's absolutely a fantastic idea to switch over to a 2x4 wall. We can, by reducing the R value in the cavity, you can warm that sheathing up so much quicker by taking, and you can take the money saved and put it on the outside as well. So you get both the science and the savings by bringing it out to the exterior. So as far as the 2x4 wall goes, it's a great idea. It really is. And then kind of moving on to attachments. Most of the time when you go to the exterior, I like to. I find the guys really like those EPDM washers. When you start getting to real thick amounts, they'll use like Power Pro deck screws. They'll use some. Basically any type of screw to kind of hold that panel on. The true strength really comes from, as far as holding power, comes from when you put the strapping on. The strapping is really going to have that compression that really holds it down tight. And me and Sean had a conversation earlier about different strapping options. With our product, it is compressible. If you put a lot of force down on it, it is compressible. So we have two different options as far as densities. We have a Comfortboard 80 and a Comfortboard 110. Now the Comfortboard 80 is what we call an 8-pound density. A Comfortboard 110 is 11-pound density. So it has the same thickness. It just takes more material and squishes it down further. And as it squishes it down further, that's what creates that higher density. So it's the same material. It has the same water resistant properties. And it kind of one of the reasons why we have such great water resistant properties is the fact our product is made with an oil-based binder. So if you think of the idea of water and oil, how those don't mix, when water hits our product, it sheds off very quickly. And that's why it doesn't absorb. Like things like fiberglass. Fiberglass will absorb water and retain it. Our material doesn't. That's why on the exterior, it works so well because it doesn't retain that water.
And it's fire retardant.
Yes.
So I want people to understand it may have oil on it, but it's not. It also doesn't catch fire.
Right. If you do a quick YouTube search, you'll always find someone putting a torch on our product, and it may change the face of the color just slightly, but it doesn't catch on fire. It has extremely high melting temperature. So if basically the material is made with basalt and other non-combustible materials that come from the earth, basically it's stone that gets melted down to lava and it gets spun like cotton candy. And as it spins it, that's what makes those fibers. It makes our material. So when they compress that material, coupled with the oil-based binder, that is what ROCKWOOL is. And for the exterior, going back to the strapping idea, they have the 80 and we have the 110. If you find, we kind of find three principles out there. Some guys really like the 110 because it gives you more rigidity, puts you more in line with like a foam board material as far as putting the strapping on, pop, 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 pop. You can just hit it and go. There's not a lot of thought put into it. When you use the 80, it takes a little more thought. You got to be a little more careful. You don't over screw your screws and your strapping. And you just kind of pay attention to it more. And some guys use a hybrid system. Well, they'll do in some more delicate areas, they'll use some 110, and the body of the wall, they'll use an 80. So they use kind of both.
So
and
we have some
details.
Can we show these details while you're talking about it? Because I don't think everybody really understands what 80 versus 110 means. And maybe will those details show that if we put that up?
Yep.
Let's see. So you tell me where you want me to go, Nick.
So if you guys look at the outside insulation layer on the right hand side there, the green portion, that's going to be the Comfortboard 80 or 110. When you look at them, they look exactly the same. Just a 110 has more resistance to it. So when you compress it, there's less ability for it to compress because it has more material in that same 1 inch. So if you had a 1 inch board compared to a 1 inch board, it would have the same look to it, same thickness. But when you go to compress it, you're going to notice that one is much more dense than the other. Now, having said that, though, once you put the strapping up on the wall and you put it up over a total assembly, it's remarkable how little compression you really get within the system. Having said that, some guys say, I've seen a lot of guys use rips of plywood. So that way, instead of using a 2.5 inch wide strapping, you now can get a 4 inch wide piece. And what that does is when you put that on there, you can put 2 screws next to each other so you don't get any rocking. A lot of guys find that that's very helpful for making a nice straight wall assembly. I see a lot of guys alternating screws. They'll use some deck screws, then they'll use a bigger, like a timber lock, or I guess more of like a headlock fastener where it's more of a structural screw. So that way you can get some really nice structural strength in there. And they'll do a kind of a combo to kind of reduce some of the price. Some guys say, I want to use all structural screws, which is fantastic. That really makes a nice solid system through and through.
Yeah. Sean, how about you? I mean, you advise on this so often. At 475, you're using these products all the time. Do you have to use plywood or OSB with these products, or can they be used independently or with a different type of product than versus an OSB or a plywood sheathing?
Yeah, so so depending on so again, I'm in Vancouver where we deal with a lot of earthquake loads, so we're always putting sheathing on our walls. But in other locations, in the Northwest, for example, you can get away from sheathing and then do metal cross strapping or metal bracing, so you get away with it. And so the one thing that I like with the sheathing is with this wall assembly we're talking about, maybe we'll just take a step back. If you did a 2x4 wall, a 5/8 or 3/4 inch plywood sheathing, and then in a sense, large amount of insulation. So if you've got 3.5 inches of stud cavity, if you did 3.5 plus, so 4, 5, 6 inches, the plywood sheathing layer can also act as now your vapor retarder or vapor barrier. So then you don't need to worry about poly. So now you just skipped a material. You have this one material that's working as your structure, your vapor barrier or vapor retarder. And if you tape the seams, it's now your air barrier. And now it's got enough structure that you can put screws through it, and you don't have to worry about hitting studs, because the 5/8 means that you only have to hit about 30% of the studs. If you go to 3/4, you only have to hit 10% of your studs. So there's some interesting things you need to talk to your structural engineer. But all of a sudden, you've built this amazing wall that is able to dry out very nicely over the course of a year, and you've got materials doing different things, but it's also probably one of the more low cost walls that you can build.
Yeah, for sure. Here's a question for you guys before we move on to the next part of this conversation. From Stephen Gibson: does the vertical strapping really need to be 3/4 inch thick? Couldn't it be a 1/2 inch, 3/8 inch, or even a 1/4 inch thick?
So Nick, do you want me to jump in?
You can if you want.
Sure. So this is one that's all about water. And there's been lots of studies out here by RDH and various individuals, our good old Joe Stebrook, where 1/2 inch still can allow water for capillary action. So water can actually still move upwards. So we really want to get past the 1/2 inch into the 5/8. So again, it is dependent on your climate. If you're in a climate that doesn't have a lot of moisture. The other thing too is typically that rain screen is working for drying. It's a drainage plane, but it also could be a ventilation plane for drying out your wall. So the more the merrier. I have people that do they actually look at the cost, and the 3/4 inch furring strips can be even more expensive than a 2x4. So people just default to a 2x4, and now you have more of a ventilation cavity to ensure that the wall can dry out. So I would say that question is the typical, kind of passive answer. It depends. I would be looking at the cost of the materials. If you're in an urban setting, you might not be able to have thicker walls because you're too close to your neighbors. But in more rural sense, where you don't need to worry about setbacks, just build a thicker wall. Look at the material prices of materials. Get the longer structural screws, JRK. Ones from Rotherblast or the ones that Nick mentioned, and just again, fasten that sweater onto your building.
It is sweater season in the Northeast, but not in Texas, according to Nick right now. So, with this, Nick, and you made a good point, and I'm playing off something that you actually said, Sean. Is there, with your exterior wall boards, your 80, or your 100s or what have you, they're also fire retardant, right? So if you are building in a multifamily environment, an urban environment, close proximity, that 3, 4, 5 foot radius from another building, does that help you get past the code issues and the fire protection? And what is that fire rating for that wall system?
It does. So, we're seeing more and more of these fire issues pop up, especially out in out west where they're having more of these wildfires. Our product is a huge advocate for if you're putting this on the exterior and you say your neighbor does have an issue, the fire's coming. Our product, because it's so resistant against fire, it's going to tremendously help potentially save on the damage to the building, on issues that may pop up. The melting point of our product compared to a lot of other ones are just so much higher, which means it can take on so much more heat than the rest of the building can.
Yeah, no, for sure. No, it's a really good point because there are very few products on the market, Nick, like yours, where it solves multiple issues when it comes to code and when it comes to building better, environmentally friendlier. I mean, so when we think about what your product does, it's a vapor barrier or a vape, or not, right? It can let the vapor just go through. It's fire retardant, right, for a house, which obviously is not only safe for the occupants but for firemen if should something ever catch on fire, and it's actually really easy to use too. Versus regular insulation. I mean, everybody's played with the old attic, fiberglass insulation. I mean, it sucks.
Right.
There's nothing fun about it.
Right. Yeah. Our product is so easy to install. It's literally, you just take a bread knife and that's the tools you need. Our Comfortboard, because it's the same material, it really just cuts so well, cuts sharp, nice, true corners.
Yeah. No, for sure. So that, I don't know if you know Greg Ugaldi. He wanted us to give you 2 thumbs up. That's why we did that, Nick. I know Nick's sitting there going, "Oh, I got 2 thumbs up." But Greg is the immediate past chair of the National Association of Home Builders. He's the guy that updates the folks in the White House and in Congress and everywhere else and travels the world. Just got back from COP26, talking about our environment and some of the big changes. And they're really pushing on that front. So it's always a pleasure when Greg joins us, and we always give him the shout outs because he has the ability to actually make change happen in a big way and be part of that conversation. So thanks for joining us today. Yeah, for sure. Stephen, by the way, just said I'm in the Northwest too. So thanks, Sean. He appreciates that. And Peter Molinar's joined us. He says it depends. I'm not sure. I think he's getting back to Stephen's comment there above. Listen,
Peter joins us a lot on the Passive Accelerator events, and we use the word "it depends" a lot because, again, when we look at these solutions, they're not just quick fixes. They take a little bit more to dive into the woods and really understand what we're trying to prove. And so it's not these quick answers of yes or no. It's like, well, it depends. Like there's other things you need to factor on. And on that point too about the COP where Greg was at is, when we need to be building homes that are more resilient. If we're going to have more power outages and floods and other things where we don't have that heat source, that electrical load coming in, more insulation allows for you to keep all that warmth or cooling inside. And so when you have these issues, you actually can live a few days without having to go outside and set up a tent because your home isn't giving you the shelter that it needs.
Right. The kind of going with that topic, when I was down here in Texas, I heard a lot of stories down here when they had all that ice storms. There were a handful of guys that had some decent insulation packages, and they all had mentioned, boy, my house is still pretty toasty.
Yeah.
Even though it's been out for a few days, it was quite nice.
Yeah, the one example, the passive house lasted for 3 days at 20 degrees before it started to go down. The only issue is that the homeowner had to go outside and put on his barbecue to get food because he didn't have the power for his induction stove. But the house was the tent, whereas a lot of people had pipes bursting and had to go to hotels or move out. So sweaters matter.
Right.
They do. I just put a banner up for you, Sean. Better sweaters on the exterior equals less human sweaters on the interior.
That's exactly it.
I love it. All right, listen. We got another comment that came in that I want to get to here from Arash Shakari. Says, where will be the continuous layer of insulation to eliminate the thermal bridges? Nick, why don't you go ahead with that? I know we talked about that a little bit earlier, but answer that.
Yeah. So because we're installing our product on the exterior, if you can kind of visualize your building, your wall assembly, where you have your studs and your sheathing, when you just address putting insulation in the cavity, you don't really address the studs that happen every 16 inches on center or 24, or the headers or the sills and all that stuff. So when you bring that insulation to the exterior, well, now you've covered up all these areas. So now the heat no longer can quickly transfer through the studs. It now has to go through the insulation, then to the studs. So therefore, you're reducing. I'm sure you guys have all heard of the term ghosting. Been into an old house where you can see the kind of dirt marks. As a kid, I always wondered what that was, and that's thermal bridging. That's a little bit of moisture developing on those studs, air going across them, and dirt coming out of the air. And that's what that is. So it gives you a good visual of what thermal bridging is. So by having our product on the outside, it's going to cut down on that tremendously.
Yeah, for sure. And I see quite a few people join. Go ahead, Sean.
I was saying is, again, the rain's coming here, so I'm going to keep hitting mute. But, one of my favorite pictures is a thermal imaging camera on a house where you can see the studs from the outside.
Right.
And that's, again, because all the heat is going through the studs. And so just to clarify, too, some people always ask, well, the screws are thermal bridge as well. And yeah, they are, but they're minimal. You could have 2,000 screws on your house, but it's a lot less than all the studs that are, letting out all that heat through it. So insulation is I hope everyone gets on board without insulation. We need it. Even 1 inch, just 1 inch, folks.
Yeah, and most people don't, just to break it down, Sean, and to clarify, thermal bridging, to truly get a thermal break on a wood-built structure, if you're not using this type of practices, now you have to build a double wall system where those studs don't go transferring through. So a double wall system means you're going to have 2 sets of studs, which doubles the cost of all your framing. It's not good for the environment. We're using more material, and you got to run that insulation like in an S pattern throughout the entire structure, and that's how you get away from that thermal bridging. But it's super expensive to do that way, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And what Sean and Nick are both talking about is if you put that thermal sweater on the exterior of the home, you can still get away with now a 2x4 stud system, right? Depending on your wind zone and all of that, hurricane weather, wherever you're at. But now you can actually put that insulation barrier in the exterior. Yes, you do have the screws, but if you took 2,000 studs and laid them out, it would fill up a warehouse. You put 2,000 screws, you can fix those in a box. So that's the difference in the size and the thermal bridging. And like we said earlier, it'll make a big difference on what you're wearing in your house versus out of your house.
And you've also haven't addressed your condensation issue either with a double-studded wall. So, right. We also address that.
So, okay, that's another interesting part. And Sean, this is somewhere where, if we really break it down between the human body, cooking, taking showers, taking baths, breathing, all of this causes humidity in a home. And when that humidity cannot transfer to the exterior or get out of the house, that's when you end up with the mold, the black mold. That's where you end up with things that you can't see within your walls that are making you sick. And we talk about this all the time with Cheryl Seco and some of the other health experts on the show, that Most people don't have migraine headaches because they're ill, or most people don't have allergies because they're ill. Science is showing that their old homes are the ones making them sick. And I think, this is very important to understand. And this is where, Nick, where you took the time to educate yourself on building science and start figuring it out when you were back in the day. This is kind of what you both are in the midst of. I mean, not only are you building healthy and you have products that you're selling, yes, you do, but your products are actually making life better, not only for our environment, but also for the occupants of these buildings, which could translate to less medical bills for you and your family moving forward. The unquantified value, right, Sean?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And everyone's clear too is when we get to these thicker levels of insulation on our walls, where again, the walls aren't breathing anymore because we don't have gaping holes. We don't have, we didn't tie in our materials. Like, you're really living in a cabin. In these higher performing homes that have these sweaters, this is where you're installing an ERV or HRV that, set of lungs to your house. You've got this fresh air machine that's running continuously 24/7, and it's getting rid of those extra humidity levels, but it's also supplying nice fresh air in your living areas and getting rid of contaminants from your cooking bathrooms. And you've got this nice system that is literally providing fresh air while that sweater and the air barriers are keeping you nice and warm or cool, depending on where you live.
Yep. We need some visuals of homes wearing sweaters for the winter, Sean. I think you should work
on it. I'll work on it.
Michael Bruce says, can it be glued on your product?
We have a few guys that are trying to glue it on the foundation. They're using a Tremco product. Now, as far as above grade goes, even if you tried gluing it on, it still has to have that strapping to really hold it. The strapping is really the key as far as keeping it on that wall assembly. Plus the strapping typically, we talked about, it's a rain screen application as well. And it's really the location where the siding and trim is being installed. So even if you try to glue it, which I don't think will work all that well, when it comes to putting on the panel before the strapping, you don't put a ton of effort into that. You're just putting enough to hold it until you get a chance to put the strapping on. So that means tack each corner. And typically that's about it. If you have a 4x8 sheet, for instance, you're putting 6 fasteners in, 1 in each corner, and then 2 in the middle. The smaller panels, you can get away with just 1 in each corner. But it's really the strapping.
Tell us a little bit, like we keep saying the strapping. Do we have a visual of that in this deck so people can understand what that means? Because I'm thinking you got this 4x8 sheet of insulation, or the 80 or 100 board that you guys are putting up. Do you got to put metal straps across it? Because that's what it sounds like to hold it in place. And I think we should clarify that.
I'm trying to find.
There we go.
Picture.
Hold on, let me blow you up.
Normally, if I was home, I'd have it as wall assembly for you, but I'm in Texas, so it's hard. But you see the strapping here, and then also over here. So all that is it's just a spruce strapping or whatever's in your territory. Oops. I'm trying to text this to you guys.
Well, here, so basically what that strapping is, this comes down to, like you said, Sean, it's almost like a lath. It's creating an air barrier between the insulation and the siding, should any water ever get behind there. But also what it does is it allows the air to circulate. So your house, that exterior wall is constantly breathing. And then when you're using your products, in this case, the ROCKWOOL on that exterior that's allowing the vapor to transfer through, that's what allows it to dry. And this is part of that whole system. It's almost like a ridge vent on a roof.
Yeah. It's a ridge vent for a wall. Yep.
Yeah. Got it. Yep. So I just want people to understand these aren't metal straps going across there. That's why I wanted to explain it. This is set up.
Some, like as Nick said, some climates you might do pressure treated products, some don't. Again, there's nothing really in the code, which is interesting. And it's one of those things too. It's the way we build right now. There does need to be some changes because it can be hard to install outside insulation when the wall is already up. This is where prefab is great, but even doing site prefab, where you've got the walls lying on your floor, before you tilt them up, you put on your WRB, your air barrier, you put on your insulation, and you're installing the 2x4, because they're 2 feet by 4 feet, boards in a sense that go on, and you can screw it all when the wall is horizontal before it gets tilted up can make it easier. Right now we have an issue where in our inspections we need to do a sheeting inspection before we can put on these products. If we can work with our inspectors and our structural engineers to where we could be able to do this easier on the horizontal before we tilt up the walls, would make it a little easier for our tradespeople.
Yeah, for sure. And so let me ask you this, Sean, real quick. When you put on that exterior sheathing, the OSB, and what have you, before you put on the insulation, like you said, because you got to have that inspection. One, now you open yourself up to weather, waiting for an inspector, which means the wall can get wet, and then you run into that issue. Is there any vapor barrier between the barrier, like you would do on on a regular constructed house? How we used to do it, like with Tyvek or any of your 475 products. Like, is there something there before you put on Nick's insulation?
No. So depending on the wall thickness, and in the colder climates, we kind of have this like rule of thumb. Ideally, the wall needs to be modeled where it's like a 1/3, 2/3 ratio, where the vapor barrier needs to be on the warm side of the wall. So if we don't have that ratio, for example, if you have a 2x6 wall with only 2 inches of extra insulation, you need to put poly or a smart vapor control layer on the inside to ensure that the vapor barrier is on the warm side of the wall. If we go to a 2x4 wall and 5 to 6 or 8 inches of outboard insulation, that sheathing layer can also be the vapor retarder. And so you've got a product that is doing more purposes. When you're looking at costs and looking at different things, multiple products can do different things and make the wall more enhanceable, deal with the affordability issues. So in that case, that sheathing layer could be air barrier, sheathing, vapor control layer, and then you put on your insulation, you got the sweater on. So again, different way of looking at our walls, but we're moving away from just that 2x6 wall. Even some people are moving to 2x8 walls just to get more insulation. And so looking at our walls and going to a 2x4 and doing more of the sweater can make a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sure. Here's another question from Arash. Without the external continuous layer, what is the real thermal resistance of the wall system if we have massive thermal bridges over or every 60 centimeters?
So Nick, do you want me to deal with that since I've been dealing with metric and you're more an imperial person?
He's doing it in his head.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, the way to think about it is if we look at a typical wall and you're going to go to your building supply store and you're going to get a bat of insulation that goes in the cavity. You're going to pick like an R22. Well, once you start putting that in your walls, if you're doing studs, like wood studs every 16 inches on center, really that wood is decreasing the R value of the wall. And so we're like, oh yeah, we built the wall R22. And you're like, no, that's 22 of the material. The effective R value, which is similar to what Arash is talking about. He's talking about the RSI, which is the kind of more the metric way of looking at the thermal resistance. So the wall studs, your material is decreasing the R value of your wall. But then if you put that extra insulation on of 1 or 2 or 3 or how thick you want, that's a solid R value. And so now when we're looking at the R value of our walls, it gets a little complicated because you have the effective R value of your wall with studs, and then your solid R value of your outsulation, and then you got to do the effective of both to get to the desired factor. But if everyone kind of started a project where it said we're going to do R20 below slab, R40 walls, R10 windows, R60 to 80 roofs, and started that as a benchmark, then you're definitely moving ahead toward a high performance building that won't need a lot of heating or cooling to operate.
Right. And I mean, that's kind of an important thing because code is the minimum, right? R21 exterior walls or wherever you live, depending on what the code is, I mean, is a minimum. And if I'm hearing you right, Sean and Nick, regardless of your zone that you live in the country, whether, you're in Louisiana or you're in Vermont or British Columbia, Canada, the same principles still apply. Is that accurate as far as how you control vapor, how you control heat and cold? Because wouldn't it be the same in the South? Like in Louisiana, you're keeping it, nice and like an ice box on the inside and it's sweating and hot outside versus in Vermont, it's an ice box outside and you're keeping it sweaty and hot on the inside.
Yeah, so in those cases, the vapor barrier changes because, again, we want the vapor barrier to be on, or vapor retarder to be on the warm side of the wall. And so when we get into like the Florida real hot community, it does get a bit tricky, and that's where you want to be working more on the modeling. But again, the same principle applies. You want to have the vapor control layer on the warm side of the wall for the majority of the year.
Right.
Making sure that they dry out in both directions. Now, in the hotter climates like California, Florida, you might only need 1 insulation or 2 inches of insulation, and you're at passive house levels because you're more dealing with shading and window size of your window are more critical than the insulation factor. But in colder climates, insulation plays a real dramatical role.
Sure. Love it. Nick, what do you want to leave us with, man? We're just about at our hour here. What haven't we covered? If I'm you, and I'm sitting there saying, all right, well, these guys are real smart and they did all their talk and their show, but here's one important thing they missed. Now's your time to put it out there because we want to make sure that everybody understands the full breadth of what you do, what ROCKWOOL does. So go for it.
Honestly, I think you guys have really hit it all. But just to kind of recap, what's really great about a product is, it doesn't absorb water. So when systems do take on water, using our product is much more forgiving than some other products on the market. You can create vapor open wall assemblies, through and through. By having exterior insulation, we can help move that dew point to the exterior, therefore keeping the systems drier. Kind of what's cool about our company right now is we have a lot of support with the builders on site, where we can go down through, we can talk through details with them. One of the biggest conversation starters we have is when you do an exterior insulation, what do you do with your window? Do you leave it in? Do you pull it out? How do you flash that? Personally, I love doing foliated here WRBs. I think it flashes in very nicely. So how do you detail that? What do you do with the buck around the window? Do you thermally break it? Do you not thermally break it? Do you value more structure over thermal bridging? All these kind of conversations pop up, and we're now connecting with the builders on site and talking with them and kind of engaging with them and bringing in our science team, like you had said earlier, Sean, about you really need to model some of these houses, especially when you get into these kind of crazy warm, cold, humid areas. I'm down here in Texas. This is one of them where, you can't just say this is what you're going to do for a blanket statement. It really is a kind of break it down. What's the design? What's the temperature? What's the humidity like? And we have a kind of a staff that kind of does that. So I think the real message kind of to leave here is using ROCKWOOL. You have support. You have a product that has forgiveness. And it's user friendly. If you have any issues, you pull it out, you fix what you need to, you put it back. There's just a lot of simplicity to a product.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you my takeaways on this and all of the ones that you just said. And this goes for Sean as well. And Sean and I know Sean a long time too. What I like about both of you, because you both are in the same market, you work together, is one, you offer a breadth of knowledge to the people that want that help and the knowledge to use your products, or even if it's not your products, both of you, I guarantee, would step up to the plate. Two, and Nick, I just found this out about you on the show, is you are not only a business development person for ROCKWOOL, but you were a practitioner prior to this. You had your own installation company. You get this and you understand it. Sean's the same way, and he's been a practitioner of this for a long, long time. And I think when companies like ROCKWOOL, companies like 475 are bringing in the talent that they're bringing in to not only just push a product, let's say, because you got the roles of selling the product, but you're really not selling a product to me. You're selling the knowledge, and that's why people want to use your products. And I think when people understand the value of what you guys do, the value of the systems, and the fact, like you said, Nick, that you guys have a full team of scientists right behind you that would say, here's how I would do the structure that you're looking to do. And if you have a super complicated structure, I'd be willing to bet they could reach out to either one of you to help them work through how they do a complicated structure as well to achieve what those R values are. So you don't have to try and figure it out on your own. You got 475, we got ROCKWOOL. What more does the world need? We're done. That's it.
Well, and again, as people are changing, again, build a mock-up. If you're worried about getting started, build a simple 2 foot by 4 foot mock-up. Do a little 1 foot by 2 foot window opening. do all these details, because then when you build it, you're just going to take that small mock-up and times it as big as the house is. So don't be afraid. Do a mock-up. Try out these new products. They'll make our buildings better.
That's right. That's right. So, Nick, I know you are the business development rep for New England. How do people get a hold of you, and can they get a hold of you if they're not in New England?
Yes. It doesn't matter where you are in the country. If, do I just give out my phone number? Is that how that works?
I wouldn't put your phone number flat out there, but hey, listen, that's fine. Just reach out to ROCKWOOL, or you can, or we'll put it in the notes how to reach you. But LinkedIn, YouTube, wherever you guys are at, you on LinkedIn?
Yes, I am on LinkedIn. All my information is there. It doesn't matter where you are in the country. You can reach out, and I will put you in contact with the correct person in that area. If you're up here in the Northeast, by all means, reach out and I'll come see you.
Perfect. And Sean, I mean, the world knows who Sean St. Amour is and where to find Sean. But Sean, why don't you give a plug for what you got going on and you got your own video podcast and stuff. So why don't you let everybody know?
Well, thanks, Mark. Sorry, thanks, Dave. And again, thanks for letting me fill in for Mark. Nick, it's a real pleasure, and good that Scott's here too. So again, if you're wanting to know more about all this stuff, 475.supply, we have all the blogs and lots of videos for how we can build better walls. And even same thing too as ROCKWOOL has, we've got ebooks that show different wall assemblies and how do you deal with different insulation types. And literally both companies have designed every wall you could think of. We know how they need to work, so connect with us. But kind of as a summary is, do your modeling, do some good designs, work with all your consultants, build mock-ups before you get going, because you don't want to be full scale building and then having issues. Just start small, learn, and grow.
Yeah, especially with supply chain. How's supply chain for you guys? You said that issues. Don't wait to the last minute. That's a problem on many fronts. Is that a problem on ROCKWOOL?
So it's getting better. Our West Virginia plant is now up and running. It's really cutting down on the lead times. We're going to see in a very short amount of time, it's really going to change that for us. So we are trending in the right direction as far as that goes, and we're going to be there in no time.
They love it. And I asked that intentionally because it is a problem out there for builders, and if they are seeing shortages in places, it's good to know that it's coming. So if they're planning jobs, you can be rest assured ROCKWOOL and 475 are doing their part to make sure you have the product for that job when it starts. So awesome.
I mean, just a simple stat is we're going to need 30% more insulation in the next 5 to 10 years because of more sweaters going on our buildings.
Right.
That's right. More sweaters on the buildings, less human sweaters on the inside. We
unless
coined that
Mark,
right here.
Sorry, unless Dave, unless they're Christmas sweaters, and we all need a good Christmas sweater for the holidays. So I wasn't able to supply mine today, but that's the only time a good sweater is needed on a human being. It's Christmas time.
If I recall, you have a very nice snowman blue sports jacket.
I do. I didn't. You know what? I even forgot to wear it today. I should have done that for you. So maybe next week.
That's right. We got a couple more weeks here. 2, right?
Yeah.
Man, it's going fast. All right, listen, both of you. Thank you so much, Sean. Thanks for always popping in and filling in when Mark's getting stuck on trains, not planes, because he does not fly, but trains.
Yeah.
Nick, you're a rock star, man. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad you're enjoying and soaking up some of that warm weather in Texas. If we can do anything for you in ROCKWOOL, let us know. We're always here for you. And Sean, same with 475. So that's a wrap, everybody. Nick, don't go anywhere. Sean, stay right where you're at if you can for a few minutes. And everybody else, we will see you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. Coffee with Dave. Do not miss it. And again, make sure you follow on these two. That way. All of them now, because the show's over. We'll see you later. Bye, everybody.